now tuned in to the cold, hard truth. Cayman's #1 hard-hitting live podcast show, where we feature some straightforward conversations on political, social, and celebrity news and all things happening in the Cayman Islands and around the world. This show was created to give the people a voice and a means of being involved and informed without any filters. Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. We bring you the tea, piping hot, so grab your favorite beverage and join the conversation via WhatsApp at 324-1612. Email tips@CaymanMarlRoad.com. Now, here's your host, Sandy Hill, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cayman Islands.
All right, there we go. My apologies. Thank you so much, Evelyn. I'm sitting here saying good morning to everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is now October the 13th. Another gorgeous and beautiful day in the Cayman Islands. Thank you, Carol and Sharon and Evelyn. Good morning to everyone. It's another gorgeous day. We are watching an area of disturbance close to Trinidad, and as we've indicated yesterday, you know, we're nowhere near the end of hurricane season quite yet. But 2020 being the type of year that it is, in all honesty, I expect 2021 to very much want to live up to expectations. So who knows? We might be going into 2021 with some early year storms because as the weatherman said the other day, the weather director here in the Cayman Islands, there has been a storm on record every single month, my apologies, of a given year, except for the month of April. Isn't that interesting? I never knew that. So good morning, Tania, Evelyn, Carol, Ingrid, Keisha. Shout out to Olivia, Miss Janet. Let me get my little buttons ready in case I want to. You guys hear all these sound effects I've got now. Some of you mentioned that you really enjoyed the ones from yesterday. Sharon, who else is here? Miss Beulah, of course, and John is joining us. Good morning to all of you, beautiful people. So I've got to find one proper one that says like a proper good morning. So how is everyone doing? Lots of beautiful sunshine. I think we had some overnight sprinkles, but looks like they may have dissipated by now. And we've got a lot to talk about. So on Sunday, by the way, I did a very interesting show about this whole award ceremony thing. And so I don't necessarily want to rehash it, but what I'm going to say is you know, it's going to get more interesting. And you're going to see why my comments on Sunday make more sense about why this whole thing of giving out awards is very premature. And in fact, I'm going to go one step further and say, when I disclose something that's coming in the future, you guys are going to change your mind about people getting awards probably entirely surrounded this whole COVID thing. That's all I'm going to say for now. Because we are knee deep into investigating a few things. Let's leave it there. We can't always show them our hand, folks. You know how it is. So yesterday we did an article about the governor visiting the lighthouse. Did you guys see that? I thought that was awesome. You know, the lighthouse is a special needs facility school here in the Cayman Islands. It is, I don't want to say the only school that we have, but I think it is, because like Sunrise Landing isn't really a school. That is a facility for special needs adults. So in terms of an educational facility, Lighthouse is it. Now, did anyone notice that in that article, the governor actually shared, and we got this information off of his social media page, that he'd been the only governor to actually visit the Lighthouse School? Did you guys miss that point? All right, let me... So I read that and I thought, that can't be right. And so we made a few phone calls and sent a few messages. And apparently that's what the Lighthouse School told him, that he had been the only governor to actually visit that facility. Now, he was there as part of them recognizing Autism Awareness Day, which was actually back in April, I believe, but naturally because of COVID, a lot of things got postponed. Sorry. Down Syndrome Month, which is the month of October, and Cerebral Palsy Day. So I was like, he's the only governor that has visited the Lighthouse School. And how long has the Lighthouse School been around? Wow. That certainly demonstrates what the other governors, I suppose, were concerned about in terms of, you know, because I mean, their function is largely like a, what would you call it? Almost like a ceremonial thing. They go to these events, they represent the Queen, you know. So I'm very, very surprised with that. So Cerebral Palsy Day is October the 6th, and Down Syndrome Month is the entire month of October. So yeah, that took me by surprise. So I want to thank the governor for finding time in his busy schedule to visit the Lighthouse students. I'm sure that they loved it, and it was appreciated. So he did perform on his steel pan. So you guys remember that Mr. Earl Lapierre has actually taught the governor, and I think somebody else as well, how to play on the steel pan. So he's done a few performances. Obviously, it's like any other musical instrument. It does take, a significant amount of practice. And he did that. The kids sung. I think they had children from, what was it called? From Savannah Primary School there. And they entertained the audience with music. They had Glenn Inanga. And Glenn, by the way, is an amazing pianist. I don't know if Glenn plays any other instruments, but he's truly amazing. And Glenn is the one who organizes the annual arts festival. I don't know if it's annual anymore. It could be every couple years, but he does the arts festival, which brings in some really top world-class clients, here in the Cayman Islands, performers, from all over the world when they have that event, to allow people in the world of music, or even if you're not in the world of music, to be able to enjoy some of the more classical genres and performances. So big shout out to Glenn. He has put many, many years of work into that particular program. And he also works very, very closely with the school children to ensure that they have opportunities to perform both locally and abroad. And I know that they have been involved in some overseas camps and so on. So big shout out to all of the students at the Lighthouse School, all of the school administrators and teachers who do a wonderful job. Miss Carol was there. And of course, Miss Carol has been highlighted recently for being the sign language interpreter at the government press briefing. So as you guys will know, this is the first time that we are having things like a press briefing where there's some representation for the hearing impaired, which is amazing. But, there you have it. So Ms. Carol is actually the person that you see in the background doing all of the sign language, so that people who are hearing impaired actually get to participate and hear, what is actually going on. And when I say hearing, you know what I mean? See what is actually going on. So big shout out to Ms. Carol. She does a wonderful job. And the governor was very pleased to have met her. And yeah, thank you so much for visiting the Lighthouse School. I just found it so strange. I'm like, he's the only governor that has visited the Lighthouse School. That is just so incredibly unreal to me. I thought the governors kind of visited any and everything when they showed up here. And so I was taken aback by that tidbit of information. All right, good folks. What else is going on here in the beautiful Cayman Islands? We're going to talk about some COVID-related things here in a second. Big shout out to JD. Who was it that just said? Yes, JD said that he loves the air horn. We got all sorts of special effects, folks, that I can bring in at the press of a button now. Tania says that she needs a job. Well, stay tuned, because as we talk about things like giving out awards and we see government spending money and those types of things during financially strained times when we're having to take out additional government loans, I think this is where now we need to pay very close attention. On the surface, all looks well. But I want to tell you that you do not take anything at face value in this country, or anywhere in the world for that matter. And you've got to just pay close attention to, exactly what is going on. Because guess what, folks? At the end of the day, these things impact you in a very real way. So as government is spending money on whatever they're spending money on, you better believe that your inability to get employment, your inability to continue paying your staff if you're a small business owner. And, there's a lot of business owners that are having to shut down their doors and to close up shop. These things matter, and they should very, very much matter to you. And, everybody is willing to look at the surface of, well, everything looks okay. We have relatively low numbers, so therefore everyone should be knighted. Not so fast, Speedy Gonzalez, not so fast. Good morning, Mr. Walton. I love that you're here again today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate the participation that we're getting on this morning program. Every single morning, literally 100 of you get up and jump in on the morning show. So thank you. And big shout out to our YouTube followers. They're not as big as the Instagram and Facebook team, but you know what? Every little bit counts. And yesterday we had quite a number of persons tuned in to the YouTube channel watching yesterday's show. So big shout out to Ms. Lorna, who came on not once, but 2 days in a row to share her story with us. Quite a sad situation, to be honest. I mean, obviously there were humorous moments and all of it, but it's also sad. We should not rejoice in seeing anyone go through a divorce, not even Mr. What's his name there? Gregory, who's now on his 4th divorce. But, I went back and I was listening last night to some of his podcasts that he had done, where he spent an hour and a half talking about this situation. And it occurred to me that, unfortunately for him, not much is going to change. He's going to be on to marriage number 5, number 6, number 7. His logic is it's better for him to get married, and so that he does not sin outside of marriage. And, that is somehow better to get married and get divorced than anything else. And he was actually talking about people who are living in sin, who do not get married and who are fornicating, basically. And how, yes, when they talk about, him having all these divorces, he calls them a Jezebel and a whore, basically, because he says that, they're still engaging in sexual activity outside of marriage. And he sees that as worse than all of his divorces. Well, the last time I checked, I'm pretty sure that the Lord in the Bible said that sin is sin. So it doesn't matter how you're sinning. And I don't know that a divorce is a sin, but I think making very poor decisions about people and jumping into relationships as quickly as obviously Mr. Mr. Gregory Watts is prepared to do is a problem. And I don't think that God would condone any of that. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So JD says definition of hypocrisy, and I agree with you. He says Bible verses, and he's saying that he's a man of the Bible. He's actually, by the way, which we didn't know, but he seems to think that this is the devil's work and why we were talking about him on his birthday. And as you guys saw yesterday, I didn't even know it was his birthday until his soon-to-be ex-wife mentioned it. And he also launched I guess it's just a Facebook show or Facebook channel called Glory FM, where he's going to be sitting there playing music and having a show. I don't know how often the show is. I have no clue if it's weekly, daily, whatever. But the launch of that, ironically, was yesterday as well. So he says that all of these coincidences of it being his birthday, of it being the launch date of his new show, and of us highlighting his situation is all the devil's work. So the devil is using CMR to somehow get to him and to highlight his shortcomings. It's amazing how when things don't go our way, we like to think that it's the devil's work. And, interestingly enough, if you are a Christian or if you believe in the Bible and what the Bible says, why don't you ever think that it's the opposite? Why do you not ever think that it is actually God's work? What if God is trying to send you a message, Mr. Gregory, as well as Ms. Lorna, that says, you know what? You need to start thinking about the fact that your actions have consequences. And if you enter into a relationship and marry someone who you barely know, somehow that does not seem to make any sense at all in terms of having a lifelong partnership and having a marriage that is going to actually, survive the test of times. And so maybe it's God and not the devil who's saying to you, Mr. Watt, that you need to pump the brakes and you need to slow down and take your time. That calls for praise the Lord. I'm just saying, not everything is the devil's work just because you don't like it. Yes, it's all a matter of perception. And so we are always happy to blame the devil for our shortcomings and take no personal accountability. The devil doesn't work in isolation, folks, right? If you believe in a devil, if you believe in a God, I know some of you don't. Some of you are like, what the hell are you talking about? These are made up fairy tale things. I'm well aware of who some of you are who don't believe in those things. But if you do believe in those things, to me, it just doesn't make any sense that you never take any accountability for your own actions, that you're always blaming somebody else. And it is so incredibly easy for you to blame the devil, this unseen presence that we all say is active in our lives. Oh, it's the devil's work. It's him that's making these things happen to me. How about a very simplistic explanation, which is consequences? Your actions have consequences. Some people call that karma. I don't even like to call it karma. It is just life. And these are the things that happen as part of our lives. So if I walk out in the middle of the street at rush hour traffic, don't look in either direction, what do you think might happen to me? I'll probably get licked down by a car. And if I get licked down by a car, I can't then say, oh my gosh, that was the devil's work. No, it's stupidity on my part for going out in the middle of traffic and not taking the necessary precautions, such as looking in either direction. And it's just that whatever actions you take in life, whether it's negative, positive, whatever, it's going to have some sort of an outcome. So the same thing happens with our marriages and our relationships. And listen, we have all been down that road. There are very few of us who can say, oh, I've been married for 50 years and everything has been perfect and rosy and no one has made any mistakes or no one has done anything wrong. I remember many, many years ago, Joelle Francis was hosting Radio Cayman's talk show at the time. And an older man called in who was a preacher. Actually, I think it was Mr. Jefferson, the old man. He called in and he was talking about marriage and relationships and whatever. And he was a little bit on his high horse about the situation. So I guess Joelle was sitting there thinking, oh, he's probably rolling his eyes. This was before they had the camera in the studio, right? So he's probably rolling his eyes and thinking, these old folks always want to pretend like they are so perfect. Like seriously, they do. And they always have these stories to tell us young people about how to live a good life and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes we think to ourselves, well, damn, it's easy to live a life of virtuousness when you're like 80 years old. Like at that point, kind of what else are you going to do? It's hard for an 80-year-old to get in a whole lot of trouble. And so those of us who were young and maybe going out and, having a drink or still indulging in relationships and whatever, we kind of look at those people and we raise an eyebrow because back in their day, they were doing the most, having relations and all sorts of stuff. And, now they don't want to admit to any of those things. So, but Cayman is small. We've heard all the stories and we kind of know. And so Joelle blurted out, well, have you ever cheated on your wife? And like literally you could hear a pin drop. It was just like, what? No one could believe that he actually said it, but it was a moment of truth, and it has stuck in my mind. This is so many years ago because, Joelle has not been hosting that show for a very long time. It's so many years. And I imagined afterwards that Joelle probably got called into the office and they were like, you can't say those things on air because, Radio Cayman is government controlled and they have all sorts of rules that they need to follow. But you know what? he really said something that day that made me pause and think to myself, we've all been in this situation and we have all had these issues. And, let's not pretend and deny them because it is what it is. So I reflect on that. And I hope that despite us looking at the sometimes unrealness of what we were hearing about Miss Lorna, we can relate that we have been there to some degree or another. I mean, I've never married someone after just knowing them for a couple months. To me, that's crazy talk. That makes no sense. And to be quite frank and honest, if someone ever suggested that to me, that would be a red flag to me to not even talk to them ever again in that particular context, because that person is living in a fantasy world. Sorry, I noticed that some of my some of my WhatsApp folks are inquiring about why they've not received a notification or pop-up about this morning show. So I'm just sending them. Coco. Hey, Coco. So Coco is perfect when she's quiet. Like she's just sitting there napping in the chair. But then sometimes she hears something. Let's give her something to bark about. She won't bark at that. So who knows what Coco just heard? She's a senior citizen. So I don't know. But anyway, so what I was saying is, at the end of the day, we're not trying to make Miss Lorna or even Gregory look bad. Clearly, he's made some poor decisions. What I would recommend for him is probably to see a professional to get some counseling, because I think we could all benefit from that on occasion. And there's nothing wrong. I know a lot of Caribbean men feel a particular way about counseling. And trust me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting counseling. We all need a professional sometimes to listen to us. And our friends, despite maybe sometimes being well-intentioned, don't always get it right. They don't know how to tell us what they need to tell us. And, honesty and friendship is something that is very rare, folks. I mean, think about it. We have so many friends that are simply not prepared to tell us the cold hard truth, and telling someone the cold hard truth is never easy. You're going to get lambasted for it. You're going to be called, a hater, and all of these things. So, the only 8 people that tuned into his live stream were people who support him and who were constantly saying to him, God's got your back, this and that. I'm like, son, listen to me. Maybe God has all of our backs, but could it not be that God is actually trying to send you a message and you are simply not listening? Marriage after marriage after marriage. And he's like, everything is about the devil trying to prevent him from being a success in life, and the devil trying to stop him from having his show. And that's why the timing of this was so ironic. I say to you, sir, dig deeper than that. Blaming the devil for your problems is a very easy cop-out. And, if we dig a little bit deeper, we can see that there is much more meaning to be gleaned from what is happening in our lives and from the poor decisions that we continue to make on a daily basis. Decisions have consequences. So Corrine, thank you so much. Karen says that she's lost a few friends for telling the cold hard truth, and it is what it is. And you know what? They were not friends. They were transient individuals coming in and out of your life. Good morning, Mr. Cayman Vlogs. I need to check out, do you have a page about Cayman Vlogs? I'd like to check out your platform based on your name. I'd love to see what you have been up to. Sounds interesting. So yes, friends and the cold hard truth don't always mix. That's why I personally keep my real friends the circle of friends extremely tight. And at the end of the day, I don't mess with a whole lot of people. Like, honestly, like, people will tell you. The people that I count as friends, I can probably count on one, maybe two hands, but mostly one. And I don't even let too many people into my personal space. So if you have ever been to my house or you even know where I live, you should probably consider yourself very, very fortunate, because even when you guys know I love to cook and I have my big cook-ups like Christmas Day and even American Thanksgiving. I love American Thanksgiving, which, by the way, is coming up soon. Sometimes I'll throw down, I'm going to get the turkey and the ham and all the sides and come together as, a group of friends to just be thankful and enjoy each other's company. The people that get invited to that, it's a very short list. It's a very exclusive list. And partly because of the space that I'm in sort of publicly, I get a lot coming at me all the time. To keep my own sanity and my own head clear, when it comes to my personal space, I keep it tight. In other words, I don't want any and everybody around me hanging out 24/7. People have access to me on WhatsApp. I got a late night phone call last night. You'd be surprised, by the way, the people that call me late into the night with all sorts of things. And I want to talk about in a second here the accident that happened over the weekend where the young man lost a large portion of his leg. I do want to have a brief discussion on that because I've just realized last night who he actually is. I don't personally know him, but I do know his father. And it kind of impacts you differently when you do know the individuals involved. So I do want to talk about that just a little bit. But yeah, at the end of the day, people call me about all sorts of things. And there are people who will share very personal things with me. I've had someone recently, a young man in this community, contact me and say that, he is gay. And I said, okay. This was a late night phone call. And he's not out of the closet yet. So obviously I will be giving no clues as to his identity. But he, felt comfortable telling me this because he has seen that I have been an advocate of people living their most authentic lives and simply being who they are. And I don't care if you are married, if you're in a relationship, if you're not living your true self and being who you are and finding happiness in that, you will be calling me late into the night with these types of phone calls because you can only live somebody else's life. I don't even want to say live a lie, but that's kind of what it is. And you can only live somebody else's vision of what your life should be for so long until one day you just wake up and you're like, I've had enough of this. And what ends up happening a lot of times is men and women start to secretly act out. So they'll start seeing people on the side or whatever, instead of them just manning up and womaning up, whatever that means, but just, pulling up their big panties and saying, listen, I need to be who I am. And, if that means that I need to disengage from certain people, if that means that I'm going to disappoint my parents or my mom or my dad who had a vision for me of being this type of person, then it's going to have to be what it is, because you will never be happy living your life for other people. All right, Tracy gives us some words of encouragement this morning about loving the Lord, and that means good or bad. She says, they're never wrong with what they do and think because you're a woman, you don't feel or speak. I think it is an educated fool. Think that Psalms 53 said that the fool and sometimes the devil doesn't even know the lane we live in gets get big up than anything else in life. Yeah. And one of the interesting things about Mr. Gregory that I have made an observation just through people who know him is that it appears that over the years, he is always he's more concerned about his public persona probably than his own true happiness. And so a lot of times he's engaged in trying to look a certain way and trying to live life a certain way. And, unfortunately, his life hasn't worked out to be a shining example for probably anyone. He's had his financial issues. He's not had any successful businesses really that he's run. And all of those things make me very, very sad. But again, I think that there's a bigger lesson to learn there, which is even when you do things, you can't do them to try to impress other people. You have to do it for the right reason. And you also have to do it the right way. You know what I mean? So there are people who've dealt with him in the realm of business who've said that, listen, this man is a con artist. He is shady. And, he doesn't believe in paying his debts and so on. So, again, lots of lessons to be learned there. Karen says, I don't believe in watering down the truth. Straight talk have no fallout. And, it's true. But Karen, most people can't take straight talk because straight talk can be a little bit harsh at times. And the harshness of it. And listen, I believe that you can have straight talk and straight dialogue very much with a view to being gentle about it. Like, you don't always have to come hard with the straight talk. Like, when I have straight talk with my 4-year-old, I try to do it in the most gentle but firm way possible, because I know when she's having a moment and she's upset and she's having whatever kind of breakdown she's having, me coming at her too hard isn't going to accomplish anything. In fact, most of the time, she's not even going to listen to me, which is quite interesting. And that is all about conflict resolution. My years as a professional, teaching adult courses has really helped me in so many different ways to be a better parent. Because I know that when I'm talking to an adult, if I'm having a conversation and we're in a heated moment and that adult is upset, hyperventilating in the middle of it, that's the worst time to actually have a proper discourse with that person, because they're not going to hear anything that I'm saying. And if they can't really listen, they can't engage in the conversation, and neither party will get anything meaningful from the process. So sometimes you have to wait to have those conversations. So yes, there are times when I employ and utilize those same life skills with my 4-year-old, because trust me, when you see her kind of hyperventilating and she's like, and you can't even understand what she's saying, I'm like, child, calm down. You take 5 and I'm going to take 6, because we both are going to need a moment here before we try this again. And so I even find that distraction, like distracting her away from whatever's upsetting her in the moment, and then we can discuss it later on when she's a lot more calm and willing to listen, works very, very well. And we use all sorts of things to just, when I say distraction, I mean something to pull her out of the moment that she's in, where she can't listen and she can't hear anything that's going on. So yesterday we had a grocery run. And, when we go to the grocery store, I do allow her to have some input in some of the things that she likes to eat and that she likes to pick up. So veggie chips are allowed. Sometimes she has regular chips, but I try to buy plant-based chips. And she saw one that she wanted from Foster's yesterday. I said, no problem. She got to pick out. She was trying to decide between a popsicle or a little ice cream cone. She picked I think she ended up going with the ice cream cone. So we got to pick out a few things. And then when we got further down the aisle, she starts seeing all the Halloween candy that's already in full display. Did you guys notice this year, by the way? Some retailers have skipped Halloween, they've skipped Thanksgiving, they've skipped winter, and they've gone straight to Christmas. Christmas decorations have been out for a couple weeks already. But anyway, so she kind of starts picking up all this candy towards the end. And listen, these grocery stores, this is if you're in the grocery and display business, you know this, they position those things at the register for a reason. Those are last minute purchases, they're mindless purchases. Why do you think they put the candy all the way down at the bottom where your kids can grab it? Your toddlers and your, school age children can just see it. It's at eye level for them and they grab it and they want it. And I was like, no. We picked up enough snacks for you. and definitely enough sweets because she has a sweet tooth, and there will be no more. So put it back. And then she wanted to start eating the veggie chips right away. And we're going out to the car and she's getting an attitude about the veggie chips. And I said, when we get home, we'll talk about it because you need to have dinner first, right? So the second we walk through the door, she's still in a funk about her veggie chips because she doesn't forget things easily, I must tell you, about how she wants her veggie chips. And I think, right, I need to distract her away from the veggie chips and get a little bit more creative as a parent. So you guys remember my story yesterday morning about the snake that we now have in our house? He's going to be gone pretty soon. So I said, oh, what about your friend Chocolate the snake? Chocolate is waiting to see you. Immediately, she forgot all about the veggie chips. And she was, oh, yes, Chocolate. Let me go see Chocolate. She was onto Chocolate. So I'm like, hold on now. If you want to see Chocolate, we need to have some proper dinner. So you're going to have some turkey and a little bit of mac and cheese and some of your vegetables. And at that point, she forgot all about the veggie chips that she was obsessing about 2 seconds before. And we were able to kind of move forward a little bit. And then as a snack after dinner, she got a few pieces of veggie chips. So I think, you know, as adults, as people who have children, people who are in relationships, we all need to learn how to compromise a little bit, how to work with people from different walks in life. Not everybody's like us, Karen. I feel you. You know, sometimes people do say that, and yet I'm like the softest person in the world, but I'm soft with children, animals like my dog, and elderly people. Able-bodied people who should be doing better and just keep looking for excuses in life. Those are not the people that I'm going to be soft with. Those are the people that I believe need to have some tough love. And if they don't get that tough love is also a tool that can help them in life, then, you know, that's really, really unfortunate. So Sai, which video, my apologies, are you referring to? Is that the one for Mr. Greg? Good morning to Ingrid. Marva, the beautiful Marva is tuned in. She says, have a terrific Tuesday. That's what I was going to call the show this morning. I forgot. I was like, what was the word I was going to use? Yes, terrific Tuesday. Thank you so much, Marva. Karen is working on the gentle, sensitive aspect, baby steps. And you know what? Not every situation requires the same response. So different people you can treat and respond to differently depending on the individuals. Just like different situations, you can also utilize a different response. So Karen, there are times when the cold hard truth is what it is. And there are other times when you have to be a little bit gentler. So yes, that gentle, sensitive aspect is really, really important. So Walton says, when you speak the truth, you do not have to remember who you spoke it to because it will still be the truth years later. You know, Mr. Walton, that is a point that I have proven time and time and time again. Even with my court cases, every time I've gone to court, well, I still got convicted last time, but the judge said the truth wasn't a part of that, his decision-making process. So all the things that might have been truthfully said had no bearing whatsoever on whether or not it amounted to harassment. So the truth apparently can harass you, is a conclusion that he came to. But let me just say this, Mr. Walton, previously to that, the truth had always been something that I relied upon to vindicate myself. And, you know, years later when the police come to you and they accuse you of doing something, sometimes you don't remember all of the details, but you remember the gist of like, okay, this is what transpired, whatever. And I've always been able to back up my truth, thankfully, by evidence such as emails and so on, which at the moment of giving my statement, I did not even recall or remember that I had. And then it came up later on that I was like, let me start looking through my emails. So I did tell the Premier's office XYZ in relation to the Nation Building Fund. And now they run to the police and they bring criminal charges against me. and pretend like I never said this. And here it is in black and white. And you can see that at those moments in a trial, those are game changers for the judges, because they're like, she said it right here. Why are you people even here wasting court time? Throw this case out yet again. So we are now on case number 9 with me versus, or the DPP versus me. And they've won 1 out of 9 so far. 2 more this year to come. So make sure that you guys stay tuned. The last 2 we're going to do, well, they probably won't be the last 2, but these 2 for this year, we're actually going to do jury trials for those. Speaking of litigation, there's something that I'm going to be posting a bit later on that you guys will find extremely interesting about how all of the media here in the Cayman Islands are being sued by an individual. But as usual, CMR is the only media house who will be putting up a story on it and admitting, as we always do, when we're being sued. Nobody else ever wants to tell you that somebody's suing them. They keep it on the hush hush. And that is why I chuckle when people say to me, oh, Ma, Road always getting sued. Actually, everybody in this country in terms of media is, I wouldn't say always, but they've all faced lawsuits. But the difference is they're not going to tell you about those lawsuits. We gladly tell you about those lawsuits because we do not believe in hiding anything around these parts. Right? We're not going to hide it. The cold hard truth applies to us as well. And so we tell you when someone is suing us and why they are suing us. And then when it all gets settled in the end, a lot of times we are tied into a gag order, so we can't tell you any details of anything. But what I can say is our position has never changed when we have settled a lawsuit. In other words, not a penny has gone anywhere. We're good. So I think it's just ironic that no one ever tells you this information, and they have their own logic as to why they don't do it. I believe in as much transparency as possible, folks. And that's what makes us a little bit different, right? We're human too. And if we screw up, then, you know, we're going to tell you that we screwed up. And sometimes it's not even a matter of screwing up. It's a matter of a little bit of a technicality. And so, you know, it is what it is. So I'll be informing you guys a little bit later on about some of those things. So over the weekend, we had a motor vehicular accident that involved a motor scooter, not a motorcycle. And we clarified this last night in the article that we did, because there is a big difference between a motor scooter and a motor bike or motorcycle. Motor scooters can only go so fast. I think they even have a different like CC rating or whatever. They're not as powerful as a motorbike. You know, motorbike can go well in excess of 100 miles an hour. So this motor scooter, I've been told, was being used for like delivery purposes. And apparently it can only go something like 40 miles an hour at the top speed. So this young man was involved in an accident. There's still some discourse about who was at fault. Obviously, they will have to call in accident recreation experts or whatever. What I can tell you is anyone who witnessed this, I'm hopeful that they will come forward and provide assistance to the police, because unfortunately, when it comes to these types of things, fault is important. And fault will determine a number of different things, including who in the end end up paying for, you know, whatever damages might come out of this. So this young man lost a good part of his leg from the knee below. And unfortunately, they were not able to reattach his knee. And I'm very, very sad to hear that, because part of me was hopeful that they would have been able to do so. But that has not happened. So he's had one surgery, and additional surgeries in the coming days will be forthcoming, because essentially what they have to do now is they have to reattach his, not reattach, but they have to almost like close off the leg properly, if that makes any sense. So that is forthcoming for him. He's going to have a very long road to recovery. And as we know, the road to recovery is never done in isolation. It is always, you know, family members that have to make sacrifices. There's a medical team, there's insurance costs. There's so many different things involved in a person's recovery when they are in an accident of this nature. So he does have a punctured lung as well. So I think he's trying to get his breathing, the doctors are trying to get his breathing under control, as well as he has some fractured ribs. So, you know, our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. I mean, this cannot be easy. Losing a limb means you have to then get a prosthesis as well, to try to assist him in living as much of a quote unquote normal life as possible. But essentially his life has changed forever. And so the question immediately becomes, as we saw in some of the comments, who is at fault? You know? So we will certainly be looking at that. We have been contacted by various people who, you know, are saying different things. There were some people who were actually on the scene even before the police got there and who say that they know what transpired. I'm hoping that those persons will definitely come forward and, you know, share their viewpoints. So I have some information that I will be sharing with the authorities, and hopefully, you know, eyewitnesses can be so sometimes afraid to come forward in Cayman, but it's really one of those things that you've got to be willing to assist the investigation. And the more statements that they have, the more eyewitnesses that they have, the better. So Tracy, thank you so much. Tracy says that I can tell you that when it comes to earthly judgments, I think it's the one who can lie and convince always seems to win. I told the truth, nothing but the truth. And because of what the gain is going to be, if he take the opposite side, a lawman told me that he feels I was lying. I told him God is watching and nothing goes unpunished. Believe about that part. Never go unpunished. So yeah, I mean, listen, I myself have made the point that, hey, you know, let's be quite frank here. After 7, 8, 9 cases, at some point, the DPP is just a matter of numbers, really. They have got to win something. I mean, you can't have 20 cases and one person winning it and don't really go, what the hell is going on here? So they finally won one, but I think everybody should be shocked at the number that they've lost over the years. But nonetheless, we are looking at our appeal options. And I agree with you, Tracy, because even in that trial, you know, I saw someone take the stand and lie through their teeth, put on an Oscar-winning performance. And essentially, the judge bought it. And because my truth was hard and cold, but it was still the truth, and I wasn't there with crocodile tears and pretending, you know, to be one way when that wasn't the truth, the judge, you know, took favor with the person who seemed to have been hurt and not knowing that this is the biggest act in the world, that that person should have just won an Oscar, you know, forget about being nominated, just hand them the damn Oscar. You've won. Let me get a little buzzer in here. Maybe that wasn't the best one. Yes, they won. And so, yes, the truth is not always crystal clear, and it does not always become as apparent as it should be to outside observers who do not have all the details. But Tracy, I can assure you that time is an equalizer in ways that we do not always understand, right? So time has a way of making sure that all things are revealed. So, we've all been in a position where we've said certain things, and then when they come to fruition, people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And you're like, da, 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 da. You just kind of sit back and wait. So I agree with you. In the end, it all seems to work itself out. Good morning, Barbara. Hi, Sue. So Sue says the poor young man has a long road to recovery. Hopefully he's strong to get through it all. Yes. And I mean, as a community, I think regardless of whose fault the accident was, we certainly have an obligation to assist, him in any way that we can. And those opportunities will definitely present themselves. So it's early days yet. Obviously, he's still very much in the hospital. We will continue to pray for his ongoing surgeries. Someone said to me there was another accident yesterday in Cayman Brack that you guys may have seen that made the news. And this was, I think this is a very, again, none of us can say with any degree of certainty with accidents who caused it or what happened or, but this individual has been such an upstanding person that it would be hard to believe that they did it on purpose for sure. So this accident in the Brack, which happened yesterday, was very, very unfortunate. Yesterday morning around 8:30, Mr. Raymond Scott, who's an elderly Brack resident, hit a pedestrian, a woman who was walking on the road. And so we started to hear about it around 9:15 or so in the morning. And we understand that her condition is life-threatening. And it's very, very, it's a bit of we're just going to have to wait and see what the final outcome of this situation will be. So our thoughts and prayers also go out to her and her family. I did see some people commenting on social media, and there were a number of individuals who were saying, that they thought he had done it on purpose, which I don't believe. I don't know this man, but I do not believe that he would have hit someone on purpose. What I do know of him and what I've heard of him is actually that he tends to be a very careful driver. And so something must have happened that day. Maybe he had a moment of carelessness or recklessness or whatever, but it was certainly nothing that was intentional. So the investigation there is ongoing. They've already sent a team to Cayman Brack, accident recreation team, to see, what has transpired. So we will keep you guys updated on that situation. But that was Mr. Raymond Scott. And a lot of you guys will know Mr. Raymond because he calls in all the time on, I think mostly Radio Cayman. And he gives a lot of updates on the ships. Like you always hear him talk about, this ship is passing. And he has his little, what do they call them? Those radios, the old time radios, RVF or whatever radios. And, probably his age, maybe he didn't even see the woman. Now, she was air ambulance yesterday to Grand Cayman, RHF radios, by the way. And he is a former seaman himself, and he does have his own heavy equipment operations there in Cayman Brack. So they did air ambulance her early afternoon, I think it was shortly after 1 o'clock, to Grand Cayman for further treatment. So as soon as we hear any additional updates on her condition, we will certainly let you guys know. Now, someone said to me this morning, it's so interesting that we know that Mr. Raymond Scott was involved in that accident. However, we do not know anything, and this is beyond interesting, about the person who ran over the manager from the Ritz-Carlton. I'm going to break this down for you guys here in a second, because I want to tell you exactly how this works and why we don't know anything about her. And you might think I'm a little bit crazy when I tell you this, but rest assured, there are certain things that I know and that I am well aware of. And the things that I am well aware of are just universal truths. So let's delve into some of those right after this quick break. Mr. Walton says accidents just happened recently. I cut my own finger. There's a definite truth to that. So let's have a chat about that here in a second. Big shout out to our friends over at Miracle Brokers. If you need to move, whether it's 5 blocks away or halfway around the world, they've got your back. They've got packaging, materials, boxes, all the stuff that goes inside, as well as they can help you ship your goods anywhere that they need to go. They'll come and pack up your house for you if you require those services. So good to know. Jess says, I too was wondering the same thing. What was that, Jess? If it was an accident? Well, I tell you what, accidents do happen. And sometimes they happen because we're careless. So, Mr. Walton, I don't know how you cut your finger yesterday, but maybe you were watching the cold hard truth and having a laugh and the knife slipped and cut your finger. That would be a little bit of recklessness on your part. Or maybe you need glasses and you didn't realize that your eyesight was getting poor and that knife kind of slipped. Maybe the knife, whatever surface you were using it on was not the ideal surface. I remember the last time I cut my finger, it was with a brand new knife set. And I needed to be a little bit more careful, not realizing how sharp those new knives were. And so things do happen. Accidents happen. When certain types of accidents happen, however, it is required legally to put some sort of blame on one side or the other. Or if you ever have gone to a coroner's inquest, they will just say death by misadventure. So in other words, it's kind of like saying shit just happens. You know what I'm saying? That probably wasn't the most appropriate sound, but it is what it is. So there are times in life when things just happen. Oh, yes. So let me tell you why, Jess, you've not heard about who this woman is. So even before, my apologies, my sinuses are feeling a little bit irritated, but even before CMR was on the scene in an official capacity, you guys know I've had my ears down to the ground. I've been in the news business for a long time. News, unofficial news, official news, whatever. And one of the universal truths I know that happens on this island is whenever you have something happen and it is a Caymanian involved, we're going to know almost immediately who the parties are, whether the person drowns, whether it's a robbery and there's a shootout and it's Caymanians who are involved in the shootout, whatever the situation is, if those people are Caymanians and they're local, somebody gets hit and ran over by a car and has died, the longer it takes for me to know who the individual is, the more I can confidently say the person is not a Caymanian. They are a visitor in our island. They're here on a work permit. They are an expat. And then eventually we'll start to get some more details on who they are. So the fact that this woman got ran over by a vehicle, and now it has it been 2 weeks yet? At least a week. And we do not know who ran her over. I can tell you with 100% certainty, without having seen any official papers, that person is an expat. That is why we have no clue who they are. And not only are they an expat, but I'm willing to put my money on the counter and say that they're probably of European Caucasian descent. Because just like this young lady, she's a Black American, we knew within a short period of time, literally within an hour or so of her demise, her name and who she was because of her position, so on. We have not heard anything else about this other person except that they have been arrested. So we don't know if they've been charged as yet. We've heard nothing on the police investigation. In fact, my sources tell me that the police file is in some sort of a secure lockdown fashion where you can't even read it. Say what? That, folks, speaks volumes in terms of who is involved, right? So I have questions. I want to know more. And I think all of you want to know more as well. So we will be watching this situation very, very closely with a view, my apologies, to bringing you some details on who this person is. They've been arrested on suspicion of careless driving. As I've said before, I need to get some tissue here, folks. Careless driving is a lesser degree of, when an accident happens, oh my gosh, you have to be charged with something. You can be charged with careless driving, dangerous driving, and careless driving is like, it was just an accident sort of thing. A lot of people have questions. They feel like something is wrong here. And I think, Sue, try and hush. Where's my buzzer? Where's my, hold on. Sue is on to something. Give me one quick second. I'm just going to take a quick commercial break. Let's go back to the national songs. I need to go grab some tissue and I'll be right back after these messages. But Sue, we're going to talk about that right after these messages. All right, folks, we're back. My apologies for that. You guys know my sinuses, they go from one extreme to the next. Either I'm like totally congested, or when they start to clear, it's like they really start to clear. So Sue makes a very good point. We suspect that you are 100% correct on this. Obviously, the young woman who lost her life worked for DART, and her friend who ran her over in a parking lot was out with her having brunch that day. And there's a lot of speculation that the friend probably is a coworker friend and works for DART as well. And they were out having brunch and probably were sipping on champagne or whatever, Prosecco, whatever, all day long at brunch. So there are some questions for sure. I think as, individuals who work for DART, obviously their lawyers would most likely be involved in the investigation of a DART employee having lost her life. And I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing or not. Lawyers have a way of, doing certain things and making things disappear and making very low-lying charges appear that you'll get a slap on the wrist for. What I found to be particularly interesting is that people who were not even there were saying that, oh, the friend accidentally knocked her over and she hit her head. What I have heard is that the woman was completely under the car, like literally just her feet were hanging out. So I don't know if you were killed by a knock on the head, or if you actually were just ran over and killed from those injuries. So, yeah. There's some questions there for sure. We will keep an eye on the situation. I think everyone deserves justice, including her family. I can see how this is going to work. Somebody gets a little check under the table, and it's a question of, this is now disappeared. Don't worry about it. We'll pay you something to just leave this as is, let our lawyers clean it up, and then you go on your merry little way. I do understand that she had a husband who I'm assuming was here in the Cayman Islands. So yes. So we'll see what happens. And things have a way in terms of information of getting to us. And we'll get it in the end. Don't worry. It's kind of like that stabbing incident at the Strand. Do you guys remember when that happened? It was a bit confusing at first, the details that were coming out. But again, Caymanians. So we knew immediately who was involved. We knew immediately who crashed into the wall and who that person is, that they were friends with, this other individual who had eventually gotten stabbed and lost his life. And, there was footage that we saw and details. But once you start to see the police case and the DPP's case, you understand that not only did the young man who did the stabbing take steps to cover up his actions afterwards, such as disposing of the clothing and the shoes, and he claims that it was an accident, and he did not know that the man had fallen on his knife, is how he put it. Obviously, the video footage showed something very, very different, but eyewitnesses could also say he was saying to him, "I'm gonna effing kill you." And unfortunately, when you say those kind of things and you hold a knife to somebody's throat and you end up subsequently killing them in a stabbing incident 2 seconds later, that's not going to really help your position legally. Sue, what are they going to do to you? You're retired. What are they going to do to us? They try to keep a lot under the table. So we shall see how it all fleshes out and keep you guys updated. So that's what it is, folks. As soon as we know who that person is, we shall certainly let you guys know, because, I don't think that it's fair that we tell you about just the Caymanians that are involved in things. We are an equal opportunity reporting agency. And so even when we had to report recently on the stock penny guy who got arrested, his friends and family are like, well, why are you reporting that he's gotten arrested? He hasn't been charged yet. Or why don't you wait until the final outcome of the case? I'm thinking, what? Are you and I on the same page here? Are we understanding the same thing? Because
this is bad.
Seriously. We talk about people who get arrested all the time. And we say, yes, they will have their day in court. And we're not saying they're innocent or guilty. We're just saying that they've been arrested. And here are the circumstances of their arrest. So when people say things to me like, well, why are we talking about, the fact that they've been arrested? I'm like, what the heck? What world are we all living in here, folks? All right. So let's move on to Friday. So on Friday, here in the Cayman Islands, what a day we had. A bit of breaking news. My apologies. Where we actually had a situation of there's a bit of a scare at the local school. Red Bay Primary had a student who'd been out for a week and had tested, now Dr. Lee has said, weekly positive. And, the administrators at the school said that they found out that morning about the status of the child, and they started immediately making phone calls to year 2 parents to come and take their kids out of school or pick up their children. Now, it got a little bit confusing because the year 2 kids in the end weren't actually able to leave. They had to remain there and get tested immediately. And so, it was the other parents who were like, oh, hell no. What? There's a positive at the school. Let me get my kids out of here. And so they went about collecting their kids. I must say, being on location, it was very orderly. I mean, parents were just showing up, taking their kids home for the day. And, there was no panic mode at the school. People were obviously very concerned. Parents were concerned about what had transpired and what was going on and how they could have a positive case at the school. So, sorry, folks, my apologies. We now know that that young lady who has tested positive, that child, was out for an entire week before these positive results came back. They had some respiratory issues, and this is why it's being counted as a positive. So a lot of people talk about, like, what's the difference between, the coronavirus and just a regular flu? They have some similarities, but they're not exactly the same. And there are unique components to the coronavirus, the COVID-19, that actually are very different from the traditional flu. And one of the things that presents itself is, as the good Dr. Lee says, he says respiratory is what I think most Americans say. Where's Dr. Lee from, by the way? I thought he was from the States, but sometimes when I hear him speak, I feel like he's maybe Canadian or something. But anyway, respiratory issues, respiratory, whatever the heck you want to call it, manifests itself differently than if you have a regular flu. So I can tell you that some of the family members of that child have contacted me and they have questioned the validity of the CMO, the chief medical officer's conclusion, and whether or not that child actually had COVID or has tested positive for COVID-19 or not. And so the doctor had said that this is what he would consider a weak case of it. He feels like the child clinically is probably not much of an exposure to others. And so, at the end of the day, everything that's being done is precautionary, because if you have one child that has it, there's a possibility of other children potentially having it. And so a large number now, in the last 3 days, we have had over 1,000 persons largely connected to that school environment, or those families have all gone about getting tested. And the only positive result was a traveler who's obviously not connected to Red Bay Primary in any way. So you've got the 1 week case with the child. What I would say is that children, and I was explaining this to someone yesterday, that children have a way of, to be quite honest, being sick with viruses, and COVID is no exception. And you would not necessarily know that that they have it. Where is this information coming from? So you may not necessarily know that they have it. Sorry, I've just seen something pop up on my screen that probably needs to come down. So, multitasking is actually not good for you, can I tell you? So yes, the other peculiar thing about children is that they also have the ability to be extremely infectious. And we have shared this on this show before, that sometimes they will have upwards of literally 5 to 10 times the viral load of their adults counterparts. And they show no symptoms. So they're more likely to be asymptomatic. And this is why I remember early on with the virus, there was a lot of rhetoric about the fact that children don't seem to be impacted by this. And then what we ended up learning is that it wasn't really a question of them not getting the coronavirus, but a lot of times it's a question of they have it, they're asymptomatics. In other words, they have no symptoms, but because their viral load is so high that they are, as the premier has rightfully said, as the chief medical officer has rightfully said, they are vectors, which just means that they're little disease carrying little buggers of the virus, and they are more likely to transmit it than others. So high viral load, no indication, no symptoms. So the average person around them isn't going to know that they've been exposed to the virus or that they have it. And this was one of the dangers of reopening schools, even in the US, is that you really take a chance with these kids and teenagers. Their immune systems might not exhibit any symptoms of having the virus, but they still have it. And it could be in this young lady's case that by the time she started to exhibit some symptoms, it was kind of like closer to the tail end of her infection. And that is why her test results are showing that she is a weak positive. And that's what that means. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that during the course of the past week or whatever amount of time that she might not have come in contact with someone else and passed it on to them. Thankfully, thus far, it does not appear that anyone else has the virus. But one of the reasons why they're asking parents to stay home until Saturday, the 17th, is that they do not want to take any chances that other children are infectious, showing no symptoms, but have it and just don't have enough of the viral load to have a positive. So there's a lot of people walking around going, why are these parents, if they got a negative result, why are they on lockdown? Why are they being quarantined at home? And I've tried to explain this as much as I possibly can, as often as I possibly can, to really get people to understand this is how it works, right? So you have a test today. That PCR test is simply testing the amount of virus that you have in your system. Just because that comes back with a negative, it doesn't mean that you do not have the virus. It just means that you don't have enough of the virus in your system to get a positive result as yet. So how sensitive these PCR tests are, how sensitive the quick result tests are, these are all things that are being discussed in the medical community. So it's really, really important that we try to understand some of the basics of what is happening with this virus and why they set this 14-day, which is like an incubation period, in place, and why they say that you take your 14 days, we can test you at the beginning, no problem, but we need to test you at the end of the 14 days. And then at the end of the 14 days, that gives you a more accurate picture of what has transpired. But in the meantime, that 14-day, 2-week period of time, you don't want to be out and about just in case we get some positive results. Now think about it. We continue to get positive results from travelers who are coming into our country, right? And a lot of these travelers are being tested at the tail end now of their stay. Remember that as of last month, when we first started bringing in, I think that was September the 17th, when we did the trial run with the BA flight. Since then, we have had a, what would you call it? We have had a procedure in place where we are testing those individuals when they fly into the Cayman Islands. But if you think that testing them at that point in time and then allowing them to commingle in the community will not have some catastrophic impact, you need to understand this is where the government could be a little bit more forthcoming with their information that would help the public to comprehend how this virus works. How many of those persons tested negative at the beginning of their stay, and how many now have tested positive at the end of their stay? So in other words, that 14-day period is a critical time frame for isolation that we cannot ignore, regardless of whether or not they get tested at the beginning or not. That is why other countries who have allowed people to come into their countries, Jamaica, Turks and Caicos, pretty much all of the rest of the Caribbean, who've allowed people to come in with, oh, I've had a clear PCR test that was done 5 days ago, 7 days ago. That's nonsensical. That's not going to tell you if when that person comes into your borders, they actually have the virus or not. That's why they've had an explosion of the viruses in those countries as they sought to reopen their borders. Well, Carol, this is a very good question that we've not been able to get a firm answer on. You know, we still don't understand the measures that the Cayman Airways staff are taking. We do know that there is no in-flight service. That we do know. And so in theory, they're not having any direct contact with the passengers, but they're still on the same plane, right? They're still potentially touching an armchair. Listen, Carol, everybody listening, let's be very frank here. You don't have to touch anything. We have been told that this virus is airborne. So Carol, I don't know how often the Cayman Airways employees are being tested who are working these flights, but it leaves a lot of questions open. So yes, they are going back into their homes, back in the community. They're grocery shopping. They're not isolating to the best of my knowledge. So that is a window. You know, one of the first things we said about the method that we're using to reopen our borders, I said my biggest concern are people going into the home of, these homes that are in self-isolation. And sure enough, the very first breach we have is what? People going into somebody's house. This is another area, Carol, that you've rightfully pointed out that is a major concern to me and others, because, it's just a very weak link in this chain that we're trying to say is going to be effective for us to reopen our borders. Those, not just, Carol, the Cayman Airways employees, but all frontline staff at the airport, customs and immigration, CBC. They also have some degree of exposure as well. It's like President Trump. He was on a plane with how many people that he has, exposed on his flights? They're like all of the crew, which is like hundreds of people that work on Air Force One, could now be impacted by their exposure because the president wasn't wearing a mask and was just walking around like he didn't care. Now he's like, oh, he's COVID free. It's a miracle. He's been cured, blah, blah, blah. Did you guys know that the coronavirus can survive on banknotes, phone screens for up to 4 weeks? This is according to a new study that is out. So the SARS-CoV-2 was detected on smooth surfaces such as glass on mobile screens and banknotes after 28 days at room temperature. Survival on stainless steel at cooler temperatures may help explain outbreaks linked to meat processing and cold storage facilities. So there's that as well. So yeah, don't think that 2 weeks, everybody's like, oh, 2 weeks is too long. Folks, 2 weeks, in fact, might be hardly long enough. Now, in other coronavirus news, one of the trials of a vaccine that they had been using, let me tell you the name of the company here. They have now actually halted this vaccine trial. And it was a late stage vaccine trial by Johnson & Johnson because trial participants have developed some sort of unexplained illness. Yeah. So folks, coronavirus, they say, is here to stay. Everybody's trying to come up with, a vaccine. Chinese firms are giving experimental COVID-19 shots to students going to school abroad or going abroad. We'll see how that pans out for them. And their public health insurance agency has said that they cannot afford free COVID-19 shots. This is China, folks. One of the world's biggest economic players saying that they can't afford to give their people free shots because they've got like 1 billion people type thing. So we will continue to keep an eye on all things coronavirus related. Of course, you guys saw yesterday that the UK has started to shut down again, taking some really strict measures to put those things in place because the virus is really out of control all over the world, resurging in the UK, in Europe, much of Europe, as well as the Caribbean, America, everywhere. So as of yesterday, France, Russia, Nepal, and several American states have all set records for their highest daily numbers of infections. Highest daily numbers, folks. And this is why I remain concerned that we are rewarding people so early on in this pandemic. We're still in the early days. We don't know if Cayman will ultimately be a success story. So far, we think we are. And we will have our fingers crossed and wash them often and try to do all these things. But we do not know what the record books will write down about what has eventually happened here for us. Let me see what sort of numbers we're talking about here. So there is something of interest, by the way, that people with coronavirus have noticed that they have, and it's called COVID brain fog or corona brain fog, where they seem to have memory issues that are actually very similar to people who have, what's it called? Give me 1 second. Let me find the term that I'm looking for. Let me find the term. It begins with an A. 1 second here. It's like, some of you are thinking, well, Sandy's obviously got some brain fog here. It'll come to me in a second. So they're calling this, there's different things that have popped up that people are thinking it's very similar to other things, but unique to the coronavirus. So for example, having a loss of smell and taste is something that is one of the markers now that they've added to the list of things that you look out for. If you have what you think is a flu and you lose your sense of taste and smell, it's probably more than just a regular flu. So cognitive symptoms, including brain loss, confusion, difficulty focusing, dizziness, and grasping for everyday words, like sometimes I do on this show. Increasingly, COVID-19 survivors are saying that brain fog is impairing their ability to work and function normally. So people think, like President Trump, which is kind of interesting, you have a bout of coronavirus and you get over it, you're done, you're back to life as normal. Well, that's actually not the case with a lot of individuals who have suffered from this virus. They will suffer from months and months and months and potentially even years. We know a guy in New York, my husband's friend, who's had the virus. And months after, he's saying that his breathing capacity still is nowhere near what it used to be. And so he's wondering, do you ever fully recover from COVID-19? Even when you think you've recovered, right? That there'd be, long-lasting implications of this disease. So they have discovered this particular new addition, if you will, and a lot of doctors and physicians are picking up on this. There's one guy here who's the chief of neuroinfectious diseases at Northwestern Medicine in Chicago, and he's already said that he has seen hundreds of survivors at his post-COVID clinic that he leads. And he says the impact on the workforce that's affected is going to be significant. So imagine this, right? The coronavirus is here. It's taking a toll on us in the moment. If you're positive for the virus, it's taking an economic toll, all this sort of thing. But now we have to worry about the long-term implications of COVID-19 and what it could potentially do to people's brain function. I mean, this is crazy. So if you were an accountant, a lawyer, a meat packer, whatever your job is, most of us rely heavily on our neural functions, our ability to recall memory things, not getting confused easily, focusing on something, not having to deal with difficulty. But these are all symptoms now that some people are exhibiting who have survived COVID-19. So the scientists are saying, listen, they don't know what causes it because it does seem to vary widely and infects even people who had mild physical illness from COVID-19 and had no previous medical conditions. And when they do an MRI, they're actually not seeing any brain damage per se. So it is a very peculiar thing. One of the leading theories is that the fog arises when the body's immune response to the virus doesn't shut down, or from inflammation in blood vessels that actually go to the brain. So you know how the body's immune system works. It's trying to fight this thing off. There's some real concerns about the level of immunity. So again, President Trump has been going around telling people that not only has he been cured of COVID, but now that he has some level of immunity to the coronavirus. And this is a very dangerous proposition for him to be putting out there, because the truth of the matter is they don't know anything about any significant things about the immunity that people actually get. One moment, please. And more, in fact, the little research that is available is pointing to the fact that the immunity is probably not a whole lot. So, you know, he's telling people, oh, don't worry about it, I'm immune. Well, you might believe that, but the scientific community probably does not share those sentiments with Mr. Trump. Confusion, delirium, and other types of altered mental function called, oh gosh, here's a big medical term. Let's see if we can pronounce it. Encephalopathy. What the heck? Let's pull it up in our dictionary and see if our dictionary can pronounce it. Thank God for modern technology, right? So encephalopathy, I think, means damage or disease that affects the brain. It happens when there's a change in the way the brain works, or a change in your body that affects your brain. Let's see if we can get a pronunciation on this from our definition. Some words, it's easier to find how they're pronounced. So let's see here. Let's see, here we go.
Encephalopathy.
Let's say it one more time.
Encephalopathy.
Encephalopathy. There's a new one for you.
Encephalopathy.
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 Encephalopathy. Say that fast 3 times and you're done for the day. So yes, there is this concern now that encephalopathy, which, you know, is the confusion, the delirium, all that stuff. Something happens to the brain during COVID and it's causing additional issues later on. So they said that a lot of times it's happening during hospitalization for COVID patients who have had the respiratory issues. And a study has found that such patients needed longer hospitalizations, had higher mortality rates, and often couldn't manage daily activities right after hospitalization. So they're going to need a lot of aftercare assistance as well. So another guy who is chief of neurological infections and global neurology at Yale School of Medicine has spoke to the possibility that inflammation in blood vessels or cells lining the vessels was involved. And, you know, we hear about inflammation a lot, and that inflammation is something that's actually not really good for our bodies. And inflammation can lead to a lot of different things, right? So his theory is that inflammatory molecules released in effective immune responses can also be sort of like toxins, particularly to the brain. Oh, this is a woman, by the way, my apologies. Dr. Serena Spudic has said that these responses, these inflammatory molecules, can be sort of like toxins, particularly to the brain. And we know that there is a higher instance of these unusual strokes that are happening. Remember, that was like months ago that they discovered the stroke situation. And otherwise healthy people, once they test positive for COVID, they're more likely to have strokes than not. So there's so much about this virus that we're still discovering. So tiny strokes may cause some symptoms, and other possible causes are autoimmune reactions when antibodies mistakenly attack nerve cells. So boy, it's crazy. The world has recorded more than 1 million new cases in the last 3 days, if you can imagine that. And India's total infections have now passed 7 million people. Woo! So new records, France, Russia, Nepal, and several US states, and India surpassed 7 million total cases. It's crazy. All right, folks, let me see some of your comments. Alzheimer's, thank you, Corrine. That was the word. Yes, Marshall. Yes, Melita. That's what I was thinking about. Oh, Irvin, I'm just seeing your comment about Johnson & Johnson. Yes. So we just spoke about that. Their experimental drug is now being pulled after people are coming down sick with, they don't even know what. So Tracy says that she quarantined for 3 weeks in her room, and I consider it as a vacation I never had with myself. I know my body did need, so if I have to stay in my room for a month to stay alive, I will do so, because staying by yourself does your body and mind good. Well, Tracy, it's interesting that you say that, because apparently self-isolation and COVID restrictions and shutdowns do have a negative impact on most people. So there's some of us who don't mind having a little bit of time to ourselves. However, the lack of a regular routine, the lack of contact with people, all of those things apparently can lead to individuals having social regression and mental health issues. And we can certainly talk about some of those things perhaps on tomorrow's show. Tracy says that she's got her Bible and CMR and Auntie Donna program and service on the internet, so she's good. I don't like the crowds for a long time. I'm good here. So there are some people, I admit, who probably are perfectly fine being in self-isolation, but the vast majority of human beings, and this is why children, I think, needed to get back, if possible, to some degree of normalcy, because we are social creatures. You know, they needed to be around other children and to socialize, and there's so much for them to learn from the socialization process. And it does have a mental health impact. Yeah, it's crazy, because Karen says, I can't understand that. I love my own company and people annoy me most days. So what I will say, Karen, is you're probably the exception and not the rule in that case. Yes. So listen, folks, it is Tuesday, so you know what that means. We've got an evening show at 7 p.m., so please tune in for that. So Evelyn is another one that says she loves being by herself. But we're probably being by yourself and then having to be forced into quarantine, forced into, social isolation is really, really different, because Karen and Tracy and Evelyn, even if you enjoy your own company, you probably have some degree of routine where you are interacting with other people, you are seeing other people, even if it's just going to the grocery store. You go from that to being at home 24/7 with no one around is probably not the same thing. And being the social creatures that we are, it does impact some people. Yeah. So on that note, tune in this evening. One final observation. Did you guys see that, unfortunately, remember we did a show about person who was jackass of the day. It wasn't really her personally, but these staycation properties who are wanting to say that they don't want locals coming to their, when I say locals, I mean residents in the Cayman Islands, not necessarily Caymanians, right? But they don't want residents using their facility, but yet they were advertising during COVID. It was very strange. It's like, why are you advertising during COVID when there's nobody else on this island but residents, right? So we did a whole show on that, and we talked about the discrimination in housing that is very apparent with these luxury rental villas and so on. Now, the lady Juliet Cumber Forgo, or I don't know exactly how she pronounces that second last name, but she actually was featured in another news media last week saying that she's now had to, because it was one of her properties that had put up this thing, and she had messaged us saying that, she had only been following the instructions of her client. And when we highlighted it, she got very upset with us, saying, oh, she employs so many Caymanians, and, we're impacting her business with this negativity. And she actually called me and had more curse words in her vocabulary. It was like, hold on a second. Where's my little buzzer? If I had this buzzer available at the moment, I would have been like, every other word was like major profanity. And the first time she called, I had my daughter in the car. So, I had to maintain my composure. And I actually hung up the phone on her, and she called me back, and I said, listen, before you say another word to me, I have my child in the car. And I would highly recommend that you reconsider how you're going to approach this conversation. Well, my kids are out on the porch, or I hadn't come out on the porch to talk to you. And I'm like, so because your kids can't hear your profanity-laced tirade, you think that it's still okay to call and talk to me like this? Woo! People, there will be times that you'll see me. It's like the days that I say, oops, I never took my medication today. I'm going to go a little ape crazy. And it was one of those days where this person is going to push my buttons. But because it is more important for me to maintain my composure in front of my child, she was able to get away with it. And then later on that day, when she started WhatsApping me in addition to this phone call, I said to her in no uncertain terms, you are one lucky woman. Because let me be very clear, and I sent her a voice note, and she claimed she was going to call her lawyer, and I'm like, go right ahead. Because what I'm telling you is not a threat. It is to advise you that the next time, and in fact, what I said to her is, you are a very lucky and fortunate woman that when you called me today, I actually had my daughter in the car. Because under ordinary circumstances, you would not be talking to me in that manner. And the second time you called, if you continued with your foul potty mouth, I don't advocate physical violence, but I did feel like I wanted to box you in your mouth at that particular time. And I said, you are a very fortunate and lucky woman. Oh, you're threatening me. I'm going to call my lawyer. Take it any way you want, lady. But I'm just telling you, in life, our actions have consequences. So you can't just go up to someone and curse them out and think that one day someone might not just slap you across your face and be like, what the hell are you thinking? Anywho, it was her lucky day. So she now is saying that her business, because she relies so heavily on visitors, tourism, that her business has had to significantly, it's laying off staff, and they've given up their office space, and she's now sharing office space with some other family members. So she's had to downsize considerably, and maybe her business is at risk of closing down entirely because we're not in a position where we can completely reopen. And there are industries like the luxury rental business who will definitely take a hit. There's no two ways about that, because unfortunately, there's no one here to rent those properties. And more ironically, since a lot of them have said that they don't want locals renting their properties, well, the residents of the Cayman Islands will find somebody who does want them. So good for them. Funny enough, I ran into a Cayman Airways pilot over the weekend, and this pilot was saying to me that he was so busy. And I'm like, busy? Where are you going? He said that inter-island travel has been amazing and has been keeping the employees at Cayman Airways extremely busy. Like they've got extra flights that Cayman Airways has been putting on the schedule because everybody's going to the BRAC and everybody's going to Little Cayman and vice versa. And people are shipping, they're ordering their Amazon shipments, all their stuff on Amazon. They're bringing stuff in and shipping like a whole container worth of cargo to the BRAC, which, by the way, big shout out to Cayman Airways. And big shout out to all of the companies all the shipping companies are doing a great job. I know a lot of you are cussing people like UPS and DHL and whatever. I haven't had to deal with, I think, one package for my husband came by UPS, but I haven't had to personally deal with them. And I have been bringing in all of my goods through Airpost. I want to give them a big shout out because they've been doing a fantastic job. I think I may have a couple of things today for the business. And big shout out to them. They've been bringing in my items since we can't travel and collect things anymore. So big shout out to Saxon over at Airpost. I can never remember the other young man's name. My apologies. I'm going to find out and give him a shout out later on. And of course to Eric Arch, who is the owner of Airpost as well. All right, folks, that's all she wrote. I wish you guys a beautiful Tuesday. I have a couple appointments. I need to go do something about the hair today. So that's going to get sorted a bit. I've got some physio coming up. So you guys do remember that I had a torn meniscus in the knee area, in the left knee. But believe it or not, it's actually been feeling pretty good the last week. Not too bad. I'm still doing some of the anti-inflammatory meds. I'm sure that they're helping. And then I need a little bit of therapy on the same shoulder. Like this side just seems really weak right now, my left side. So I'm signed up for some physio. I'm going to do a bit of physio as well. Thank you so much, Miss Darlene. And I'm going to try to book some of those things today and into tomorrow and get things done. So I want you guys to have a super productive day. I see a couple customers already messaging me for the morning on my WhatsApp business line. So I'm going to go and respond to them before I head out to run some errands. And at some point this week, I've got to get back to court and definitely get a few things organized as well, so I can keep you guys updated on all of the events that are happening in court. So there is that case with the employees that came in at the HSA, supposedly stealing overtime. That is still ongoing, folks. I'm hoping it's going to wrap up in the next week so that we can get a verdict and tell you guys what the outcome of that is. So yes, have a blessed day. See you at 7 o'clock this evening. Please stay safe on the roadways. And we'll talk some more this evening. We can talk about pollution in the Cayman Islands, some of the things that have been suggested that we can do to kind of bring that situation under control. We need help here, folks. Our environment looks like a hot mess. So stay tuned, be blessed, and don't be stressed.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Cold Hard Truth. Make sure to check Facebook for showtimes and more information and the latest news at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Subscribe to our IG and Facebook pages to get the latest happenings.